Okay, so everyone should have created a folder on their desktop with their name. Within it should be a mode dial folder. Pretend I'm already in the mode dial project folder that I've created within my own folder on the desktop of the computer. What you will do, hopefully you've renamed all of your files. So you can see here, for this project it would say your first and last name, then mode dial, and then the files should be numbered. And these also should be numbered in the order that you took them, which hopefully you took them all in order from the mode dial project sheet. If you ended up going back and reshooting something, you're going to have to make note of that as you're renaming things or these files, because you might need to manually go in and rename them. So if you took, let's say, it should have been image number 4, but you took it at the end, you'll have to make that number that would have been 4 on your list if you were following the instructions, and then rename that what would have been image 35 if the batch rename would have done it at the end. You have to rename it number 4 and then adjust the names of all the others. So let me just show you really quickly if you needed to go in and manually rename something. So let's say I need to change these all, and so because sample 13 here, let's say should be sample 14 should be the name instead of 13, and then I have to go through and change all of these. You can also just click once, so you don't want to double click, because if you double click on an image, you'll see it opens up in preview, and you don't want that. So if you single click on an image, see how it created a little bar, it kind of highlighted just the name, and I can then type in here and change this to whatever I want. So this maybe is number 27. I'm going to leave it 13, but you can just go in and type that there. You definitely don't want to delete that .jpg. If you delete that, then the computer doesn't know what type of file it is, and it doesn't know what to do with it, and so it can corrupt the file. So make sure you leave the file extension, which is .jpg or .jpeg, or it should also be JPG. So you want to leave that. The other option to rename it is you can also either right-click and then go to rename here, or you can go to File, Rename once you've selected your photo. So just click once, a single click on the name of the file, and then you can also go to File, Rename, and then it'll allow you to start typing. So those are the different options for renaming your files. So I want you to create 3 different folders for all of your images. So remember on the project handout, there were 3 different sections. So the first section was shutter speed, the second section was aperture, and then the third was manual. So I want you to create a project folder for each of those different sections. So I think I have written down here on So I think I've written down the numbers. So the shutter speed photos should be photos number 1 through 12 that you shot. The aperture photos should be numbers 13 through 24, and then the manual photos should be 25 through 33. And and it lists here on your instructions which numbered files should go in which folders. But as I said, you'll have to go through and make sure that the numbers, that the batch renaming corresponds with the correct numbers that you shot. So is that clear to everyone? Do I need to repeat that? Okay. So the other thing that I want to mention is as we start to make these contact sheets in Photoshop, Photoshop can get a little bit confused with some of these naming conventions. It won't allow you to specify which files go where on the contact sheet, so they have to be named in a very specific way in order for them to lay out correctly. And one of the things that when we did the batch renaming is the first files, number 1 through 9, just show up as 1 through 9, and so they're a single digit. But then numbers 10 through 33 are 2 digits, and Photoshop gets confused because it doesn't like that the that numbers 1 through 9 have only a single digit, whereas the others have 2 digits. So we have to actually go in and fix that and put a 0 before the 1 or the 2. So you can see it's kind of hard to read, I know, but you want to put a 0 in front of, so if it will say your name, mode dial, and then the battery name would have named it 1, but now we want to change it to your name, mode dial 01, and then 02, and then again you can click in and make it 03. So you'll just have to manually go in and rename all of those files, your files 1 through 9, to put a 0 in front of the number. So that you do that so that when Photoshop lays it out as a contact sheet, those files are next to each other. Otherwise, what it'll do is it'll put file number 1 and then next to it number 11, because it gets confused. It doesn't know the order because it's the 1 through 9 only have a single digit. So once you finish batch renaming your files, or you can even go in and manually rename them if you like, it's up to you. And then you create 3 folders within your mode dial project folder. You'll put the files that correspond with the 3 sections of our project into those folders. So as I said, folder 1 here, you see I have image 1 through 12. Then you go through, you rename all of these individually, and actually, let me just bear with me, or actually I'll leave some of them incorrectly named so you can see what happens if you forget to do this step of renaming. So I have my 3 folders here. So once you're finished with that, you're ready to make your contact sheet. And if you want, it might be a good idea, if you think you're ready for this step, just call me over and I can come take a look and make sure your files are the way they need to be in order to properly make your contact sheet, because everything needs to be set up in this stage in order to make your correct contact sheet. You can't fix it after, like later in Photoshop. So once you do that, then you'd be ready to go into Photoshop. So, and just as a quick reminder, I know it gets kind of cut off on the projection screen up there, but to know you're properly in Photoshop, you'll see it says Photoshop CC on the top left-hand side of the screen. So that's when you know you're in the proper menus for Photoshop, because sometimes if you open up Photoshop but then you click out on the desktop, then your menu will change to the Finder menu instead of the Photoshop menu, and you won't have the options you're looking for there. So make sure you're clicked onto our Photoshop workspace and that it says Photoshop CC on the top left-hand side. So then from there, you go to File and then go down to Automate, and then you'll see this pop-up comes up on the right once you hover over Automate. So you don't actually need to click on it, just hover over Automate, and then you'll see an option for Contact Sheet 2. So you want to click on Contact Sheet 2. And then you see all the options for the contact sheet pop up here, and this is what I have printed onto your instructions for making contact sheets. So you can see all of the options that you should have selected when you're creating your contact sheet. So the first thing that you're definitely going to need to change when this window pops up is to select the correct folder where your images are stored. So under Source Images, it says Use, and then there's Folder, you want to keep that, and then you click on Choose. So once you go to Choose, you can browse for your folder. So you'll have to find it on your desktop. So sometimes you'll have to go to Users, then find User. You should be logged in as Student, and then you'll find your desktop, and then you'll find your folder. So mine's just called Collins, and then within that it should say Mode Dial. You'd click the Mode Dial, and then you see your 3 folders for your project here, and then you click Open. So now it tells you where the file is that you're looking here. So next to the Choose button, you'll see the file path, and you'll know you're in the correct file if you're in the file that ends, it should say Mode Dial at the end. You want to make sure Include Subfolders is checked and that Group Images by Folder is checked. And what this is doing, and the reason that I had you create 3 different folders is I want you to have a separate contact sheet for each section of the shoot. So I want one contact sheet that has all of the images where you change shutter speed. Then you'll have another contact sheet where you have all of your images where you change the aperture. And then lastly, a contact sheet that has only your images that you shot in manual mode. So does that make sense? So that way, when you're looking through your contact sheet, it's easy to see how changing the shutter speed affected your photos. So you can look at this contact sheet and actually start to understand when using different shutter speeds or apertures or other settings was most effective for whatever result you were trying to get in that image. So then here you can see there's under document you can specify the size of the document, and again this is on your sheet, but I recommend doing it as an 8x10 sheet because that would be like a common size if you're printing on photo paper, an 8x10 print. The resolution should be 180 pixels per inch. And then the color is RGB, this is all fine. Then for thumbnails, this is another area to kind of pay attention to. You can specify the columns and rows. So we have 12 images for our first 2 sections and then 9 images for our last section. So 12 for shutter speed, 12 for aperture, and then 9 for manual. So I'm going to make sure that I have enough columns and rows to fit 12 photos. So, right now I wanted to do 3 across and 4 rows. But what's another way I could arrange this to put 12 images on a sheet? Someone want to give me an example? So what's a multiple of 12 besides 3 across and 4 down? How else could I have done this? So yeah, you could do 6 across and 2 down. So you could have 6 columns and 2 rows. What else? Does everyone want to just give a number? Well, you could do 2 columns and 6 rows. You could also do 4 columns and 3 rows. But in this case, I'm asking you to do 3 columns and 4 rows because we shot images in sets of 3. So if we have 3 columns, then you have the 3 photos where you were working in a set next to each other. So you can look at how those images changed from image to image. So that's why I chose this. But in the future, and the reason that I'm mentioning this now, is you may have a different number of images I want you to put onto one contact sheet. So maybe you do a contact sheet that has 20 images. Can someone give me a number of how you would arrange this if you wanted to have all 20 images on one sheet? What's a multiple of 20? Anyone? How can you get 20 images on one sheet? Yeah. Yeah, you can make them smaller. So how would you do that though? In here you have to tell Photoshop how many photos you want in a column and how many photos you want in a row. So if you want to lay out 20, what's a multiple of 20? So you could do 10 and 2. So either 10 rows and 2 columns or 2 columns and 10 rows. You could also do 5 rows and 4 columns. So I'm just trying to explain this so that next time for our next project you're going to use different numbers here. So you won't use exactly the same number here, or you won't get all of your images to fit on one sheet. So once you have all these settings in here, and you want to make sure for the font, you can use any font you like. Just make sure it's a small point, so like 10-point font, because you don't want to have little tiny images and giant font. You want the font to be sort of small as well. You can hit OK, and you'll see what happens is Photoshop is starting to work on laying out all my files, and this might take a couple of minutes. So while this is working, does anyone have any questions or need me to repeat any of these steps? So the point here is we're just trying to lay out all of our photos from our shoot onto one page. And of course, for this project, we're laying them onto 3 pages because I want you to be able to look at them separately for each section of the assignment. So this is sort of a way to look at your proofs and make sure you could select the best image, or you can compare side by side how changing the different settings impacted your images. Okay, so here now it's done. So you see now across the top here in my document, you only see one contact sheet, but across the top you'll see there's 3 names. You can click on them. So there's the contact sheet -001, contact sheet -002, and contact sheet -003. So these are just sample images. Obviously these aren't the images. I didn't go out and shoot with you, so I didn't have the same photos that you'll have for this project. So I just put some placeholders into my folder so that you could see this. But see how it creates now we have 3, because I remember I said to choose 3 columns and 4 rows. Well, now you see 1, 2, 3 photos across, and 1, 2, 3, 4 photos down. And it has the name of the file underneath here. So you can see now I have, if you look at the names, it has my sample 1, 2, and 3 across, 4, 5, it goes to 10. And the reason that it's no longer in order, so it goes from 5 to 10, and then number 6 is down here, number 7 is at the bottom quarter, 8, 9. Well, the reason that it laid it out that way is because I forgot to go in and change it from sample 6 to sample 06. So that's why I added that step in before you even start making your contact sheet. You have to rename them. Otherwise, Photoshop puts them out of order, and there isn't a way to fix it. You have to rename them and then do this whole process over again to recreate your contact sheet. So once you have your contact sheet created, now you need to save it. So what you do is in the Photoshop menu, you go to File, Save, and you can change the name. So what I want you to do is to actually change the name to add your last name. So I can do Collins, so that way when you upload them onto Canvas and I'm looking at these to grade them, I can easily see whose contact sheet it is. So I'll do Collins contact sheet, and I can leave the rest the same. I can select which folder to put it in. So you would go in this Where section, find your folder again for the project. So you would go to the desktop. Oh, let's see. So you can expand it by clicking this little arrow. So you can go to the desktop and then find your folder. And then the format, instead of saving it as a Photoshop file, I would like you to save it as a JPEG. So you'll have to use this drop down and change it from Photoshop to JPEG. And then you can click Save. Here it's asking what the JPEG options. Just make sure that the quality is set all the way up. So here if I move this arrow, you can see it changes the quality. Just move it all the way up to high or to maximum quality here, and then hit OK. And then it'll save that file. And then you click over to the next sheet, do the same thing. Go to File, Save, or Save As. Either one works. And it should know what folder I just put the last one in, so you don't have to reselect the folder. Just go ahead, change the name, change it from a Photoshop file to a JPEG, save, and then it'll go back to this JPEG. Make sure it's already set to max. It should already be there, saved like that. Hit OK. Then you want to click to your third sheet. Same thing. So I just changed the name, Collins. Then from a Photoshop file to JPEG, hit Save, hit OK. So that's basically it. So that's how you create your Photoshop, your contact sheets in Photoshop. And the next step, which I'll show you on Monday, or maybe tomorrow, actually I'll show you tomorrow, how to actually upload them, where to put them onto Canvas. So if anyone finishes this early today, and then you also finish your Photoshop toolbar worksheet, then I can show you, I'll work with you individually to get these uploaded onto Canvas if you're ahead. Otherwise, you can also just start playing around in Photoshop, but again, let me know, and I can show you a few things to start testing out in Photoshop if you have time at the end of the day.